The champagne had barely stopped fizzing when Adrian slid the divorce papers across the anniversary dinner table. His pregnant wife, Elena, read the first page in silence while his mistress smirked beside him and wore Elena's wedding ring. At the far end, his mother applauded as though humiliation were entertainment. Then Adrian kicked her out. The cruelty left her strangely calm. What he did not know, what everyone in that glittering room was unaware of, was that the quiet woman he had discarded was the secret owner of the bank financing his $12 billion expansion. Before she reached the gates, Elena made one call. His accounts froze. By sunrise, the bank had seized his empire, towers, factories, private jets, shell companies, and every asset he had pledged to fund the expansion. Investors vanished. Board members turned on him. The mistress who had worn another woman's ring discovered that diamonds meant nothing when the cards stopped working. His mother, who had cheered the divorce, watched security remove them from the mansion Adrian believed he owned. But Elena was not finished. She returned days later, not as the abandoned wife they had mocked, but as the woman whose signature controlled their future. Adrian expected tears. Instead, she carried evidence, hidden transfers, forged guarantees, and a betrayal buried beneath years of marriage. She gave him one choice: confess publicly, surrender everything, and protect their unborn child from the scandal, or face charges that would leave him with nothing. He chose pride. That was when she closed the gates. Months later, the man who had served her papers at their anniversary dinner stood outside those same gates with his mistress and his mother, begging for mercy. Elena watched from the balcony, one hand over her pregnant belly, knowing the empire they wanted back had always belonged to her. Before we uncover how a woman dismissed as powerless quietly brought a $12 billion empire to its knees, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Stories like this reveal what happens when loyalty is mistaken for weakness, dignity is pushed too far, and those who celebrate another person's humiliation discover that consequences have been listening. Your subscription helps keep these powerful stories coming, and your support shows that you stand with people who rise without surrendering their self-respect. Adrian Vale had always believed that silence meant surrender. It was the mistake upon which he had built his marriage, his company, and eventually his ruin. Long before private jets carried his executives between glass towers bearing his name, Adrian had been a hungry young developer with one decent suit, 3 unpaid loans, and an ability to enter any room as though he already owned it. He had grown up in a narrow townhouse where his mother, Celeste, polished old silverware every Sunday, even after the electricity had been disconnected. "People forgive poverty," she used to tell him. "They never forgive looking poor." Celeste had trained her only son to hide every weakness behind good posture and expensive-looking confidence. When debt collectors came to the door, she made Adrian sit quietly in the parlor while she played classical music loudly enough to drown out the knocking. When neighbors whispered, she bought flowers with grocery money and placed them in the front window. Adrian learned that appearances could delay consequences. Years later, he would forget that delay was not the same as escape. He met Elena Marlowe on a rainy Thursday afternoon inside the headquarters of Havenridge Bank. He was 29, ambitious, and desperate for financing. She was 26, dressed in a plain grey coat, carrying a folder that looked too heavy for her narrow arms. He assumed she was an assistant. The bank's senior lending officer had kept Adrian waiting for almost an hour. He paced beneath a marble clock, rehearsing the presentation that he believed would change his life. His company owned 2 neglected buildings and a half-finished shopping complex. He wanted enough money to acquire an abandoned warehouse district along the river. Most banks had rejected him. Havenridge had agreed to listen. When Elena entered the waiting area, rain glistening in her dark hair, Adrian barely looked at her. She sat across from him and opened the folder. Inside were architectural reports, property maps, and financial statements marked with handwritten notes. Adrian noticed the maps. "You're reviewing the river district?" he asked. Elena looked up. "Why?" "Because that block is about to become the most valuable commercial corridor in the city. She studied him for a moment. Most people call it contaminated land surrounded by abandoned factories. Most people only recognize value after someone else proves it exists. A faint smile touched her face. Adrian sat beside her without being invited. He explained his plan with the confidence of a man who had practiced sounding certain because uncertainty terrified him. He described pedestrian plazas, apartments, technology offices, restaurants, and a transit link connecting the river to downtown. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she pointed to one of his projections. "You've underestimated environmental cleanup by at least 40%. Adrian frowned. "How would you know?" "My father used to say that soil remembers everything people bury in it." "That doesn't answer my question." "It answers more than you realize." Before Adrian could press further, the lending officer appeared. "Mr. Vale, we are ready for you." The officer then turned to Elena and lowered his head respectfully. "Ms. Marlowe, the trustees are waiting upstairs." Adrian watched her walk toward the private elevators. There was no nameplate identifying her, no entourage following her, and no visible reason for a senior banker to address her with such care. He should have wondered. Instead, he decided that mystery made her interesting. His loan was approved 3 weeks later, but not before Havenridge demanded unusual protections. The bank would retain sweeping rights over the project if Adrian violated reporting rules, concealed debt, moved secured assets, or misrepresented guarantees. His lawyer advised caution. "These covenants are strict," the lawyer said. "Havenridge could take control quickly if you default." Adrian tapped the signature page with his pen. "Banks write threats because they expect borrowers to be afraid. This bank is different. Every institution says that." He signed. On the final page, beneath several layers of corporate entities, appeared the name Marlowe Stewardship Trust. Adrian never read it. He had already decided that details were for people who lacked vision. Elena remembered that signature years later as she sat at the anniversary table, holding divorce papers while Vanessa Cole displayed Elena's wedding ring like a trophy. The ring had belonged to Elena's grandmother. It was an antique band set with a single pale diamond and 2 tiny emeralds. Elena's father had kept it in a safe for 18 years after her mother died. "Your grandmother wore this through war, bankruptcy, and exile," he told Elena the night before her wedding. "It is not valuable because of the stones. It is valuable because nobody managed to take it from her." Elena had laughed softly. "Then perhaps I should keep it locked away." Her father's expression became serious. "A ring is a promise, but it is also a warning. Never place your inheritance in the hands of someone who thinks love makes you careless." At the time, Elena had believed he was being overprotective. Now the ring glittered on Vanessa's finger beneath the chandelier. Elena did not ask how she had obtained it. She already knew. 2 weeks earlier, she had found the jewelry safe open. Adrian claimed an insurance appraiser had collected several items for valuation. Elena had accepted the explanation with a nod, even though no appraiser had been scheduled. She had learned that confronting a liar too early only taught him which evidence to hide. So she waited. Adrian mistook that waiting for blindness. His relationship with Elena had begun with persistence disguised as devotion. After their first meeting at Havenridge, he found reasons to return to the bank. He sent her coffee, though she had never told him what she drank. He invited her to tour the river district. He remembered details from their conversations and repeated them later as proof that he listened. At first, Elena resisted. Her father, Jonathan Marlowe, had raised her within the careful privacy of old wealth. Havenridge was not merely a bank to the Marlowe family. It was the surviving branch of a financial network her great-grandmother had rebuilt after political upheaval forced the family to leave 3 countries. The ownership structure was intentionally difficult to trace. Voting control rested in a trust. The trust appointed a stewardship council. Elena, as principal beneficiary and later chair, could influence lending policy, replace executives, and authorize extraordinary enforcement actions. Her name rarely appeared publicly. Jonathan believed invisibility was protection. People behave honestly around those they consider unimportant, he told her. Never rush to correct their misunderstanding. Elena disliked the secrecy when she was younger. She wanted a normal career, friendships untouched by calculation, and a marriage to someone who loved her without knowing what she controlled. Adrian seemed to offer that possibility. He believed her family was comfortable but no longer powerful. Jonathan encouraged the assumption by living simply, driving an old sedan, and refusing interviews. When Adrian asked what Elena did, she said she worked with charitable trusts and private investments. It was true, though incomplete. The first time Adrian took her to dinner, the restaurant lost their reservation. The manager offered a table near the kitchen. Adrian became furious, but Elena accepted it. Halfway through the meal, a waiter dropped a tray. Glass shattered across the floor. Adrian laughed with embarrassment while Elena knelt to help collect the unbroken silverware. "You don't have to do that," Adrian whispered. "Neither does the waiter," she replied. Later, Adrian told her that her humility impressed him. What he actually remembered was the manager's surprise when several prominent financiers crossed the restaurant to greet her. He began to suspect that Elena's connections could be useful. Their courtship moved quickly after Havenridge approved his river project. Adrian's development succeeded beyond expectations. Property values rose. Technology companies signed leases before construction was complete. Financial magazines called him fearless. He credited instinct. Elena knew the project would have failed without 3 restructuring agreements quietly approved by Havenridge. When cleanup costs exceeded Adrian's budget, she persuaded the Stewardship Council not to foreclose. When a contractor collapsed, she introduced Adrian to a replacement through a charitable foundation. When zoning resistance threatened the transit link, she asked an old family friend to arrange mediation. She never told Adrian. She wanted him to feel supported, not managed. That distinction would later cost her years. Jonathan Marlowe saw the danger before she did. On the morning of Elena's wedding, he stood beside her in the library of the family estate. Beyond the windows, workers arranged white chairs beneath ancient cedar trees. Jonathan appeared calm, but his hands shook as he fastened a small pearl clasp at the back of her necklace. "He loves what you make possible," he said. "I am still trying to determine whether he loves you." Elena turned. "You promised not to judge him by his ambition." "I don't. Ambition can build hospitals or prisons. Character chooses which. He does not know about the bank. And that is why today matters." Jonathan opened a drawer and removed 2 documents. One was a marriage settlement protecting Elena's inherited assets. The other appointed her successor chair of the Marlowe Stewardship Trust upon Jonathan's death or incapacity. "You must never allow affection to erase structure," he said. Elena felt suddenly cold, despite the summer sunlight. "This sounds like a farewell." "It is advice. You are not sick." "No, but I am old enough to recognize patterns." He placed the papers in her hands. Adrian signs what benefits him and ignores what restrains him. One day, he may do the same with people. Elena almost refused the documents out of loyalty to the man she was about to marry. Instead, she signed. Heavy foreshadowing often looks obvious only after disaster arrives. At the wedding, Adrian placed the emerald and diamond ring on Elena's finger and promised that nobody would ever make her feel alone again. Celeste cried loudly in the front row. Jonathan watched without expression. During the reception, Adrian drew Elena beneath the cedar trees. "One day," he whispered, Everything beyond these gates will be ours. Elena corrected him gently. Not everything has to be owned. Adrian smiled. That is something only people with enough money say. For the first years of marriage, he was attentive. He brought Elena flowers after difficult meetings. He called from construction sites. He asked her opinion on building designs and seemed to value her restraint. Elena became the balance in his life. When Adrian wanted to acquire recklessly, she advised patience. When he wanted to humiliate competitors, she urged negotiation. When Celeste demanded a mansion large enough to erase every memory of poverty, Elena found a historic estate that could be restored instead of demolished. The property was held by one of the Marlowe trusts, though Adrian did not know it. He called it Vale House. Celeste ordered towels embroidered with the letter V. The iron gates displayed two weathered griffins, each holding a shield marked with an M. Adrian assumed the symbol belonged to the estate's original architect. Elena never corrected him. Jonathan died 4 years into their marriage. His death was sudden, caused by an undiagnosed heart condition. Elena received the call while attending the opening of Adrian's third tower. Cameras surrounded them. Investors waited for a speech. Adrian squeezed her hand when she told him, but he did not leave the event. "Your father would understand," he said. "This opening affects thousands of employees." Elena stood beside the stage for 40 minutes, while Adrian praised sacrifice, legacy, and family. At the funeral, he arrived late. That evening, Elena entered Jonathan's study and found a sealed letter. "My dearest Elena, power does not corrupt everyone. Sometimes it simply removes the need to pretend. Watch carefully when Adrian believes he no longer needs your approval. Remember the gates. Remember who holds the keys. Your loving father." Elena folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside the trust documents. Within 6 months, she became chair of the Stewardship Council. Her first major decision was whether Havenridge should approve Adrian's acquisition of a struggling construction company. The proposal was risky but potentially transformative. Elena disclosed her marriage and recused herself from the formal vote, yet the other trustees understood her hopes. The financing was approved. Adrian's empire doubled. He did not thank her because he did not know. Over time, secrecy changed from a test of love into a trap. Each success made the truth harder to reveal. If Elena told him after the river project, he might believe she had deceived him. If she told him after the acquisition, he might wonder whether his achievements were his own. She kept waiting for a moment when honesty would not feel like an accusation. That moment never arrived. Adrian changed gradually enough that every cruelty could be explained away. He stopped asking about Elena's work. He interrupted her in front of executives. He referred to her charitable commitments as hobbies. When she questioned his spending, he called her cautious because she had never understood the pressure of building something significant. Celeste encouraged him. "A wife should admire her husband," she said during Sunday dinners, "not audit him." Elena smiled politely. "I am not auditing Adrian." "Then stop sounding like a banker." The irony passed unnoticed. Vanessa entered their lives during preparations for the $12 expansion. She was a public relations consultant known for turning aggressive executives into heroic magazine profiles. She was polished, strategic, and skilled at identifying the insecurity beneath another person's confidence. Adrian wanted the world to see him as a visionary rather than a developer. Vanessa offered that transformation. She arranged photographs of him walking through factories in rolled-up sleeves. She placed stories about his childhood struggles. She persuaded business channels to call his expansion the Vale Renaissance. Elena noticed that Vanessa was always near him during interviews, adjusting his tie or whispering into his ear. "You should set boundaries," Elena said one evening. Adrian did not look up from his phone. You sound jealous. I sound observant. She understands the demands of my work. I have spent 9 years understanding those demands. You spent 9 years telling me to slow down. Because you are moving faster than the ground beneath you can hold. Adrian laughed. That is exactly the kind of fear I have outgrown. The expansion involved ports, energy facilities, manufacturing plants, luxury towers, and a proposed smart city on reclaimed industrial land. Haven Ridge served as lead financier for a syndicate of banks. The loan agreement was enormous. Buried within it were covenants stricter than those in Adrian's first loan. Vale Global had to maintain specific debt ratios, disclose related party transfers, obtain permission before pledging collateral elsewhere, and certify that every personal guarantee was authentic. Adrian signed at a ceremony surrounded by cameras. Elena watched from the back of the room. As he lifted the pen, he caught her eye. See, he said later, sometimes the people who take the biggest risks receive the biggest rewards. Elena touched his sleeve. Or the largest consequences. He kissed her forehead as though comforting a frightened child. 3 months later, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She had wanted a child for years. 2 earlier pregnancies had ended before she could tell anyone beyond Adrian. The second loss left her sitting alone in a private hospital room while Adrian attended an awards ceremony. He sent flowers. Celeste sent advice. You should try not to be so tense, she said. Men need peace at home. Elena had never forgiven the sentence, though she rarely allowed herself to remember it. When the doctor confirmed the new pregnancy, Elena felt joy tangled with fear. She waited until the first scans showed reassuring progress. Then she planned to tell Adrian during a quiet dinner at home. He cancelled. Vanessa needed him at a media event. Elena placed the ultrasound photograph inside a drawer beside Jonathan's letter. 2 days later, she told Adrian in his office. For a moment, genuine happiness crossed his face. He embraced her, asked whether the doctor was confident, and pressed his hand lightly to her stomach. Then his phone rang. Vanessa's name appeared. Adrian stepped away to answer. By the time he returned, his attention had shifted to an investor crisis. We'll celebrate properly, he promised. They never did. As Elena's pregnancy progressed, Adrian spent more nights away. He claimed he was negotiating overseas. His staff avoided Elena's eyes. Drivers changed routes when she asked to stop at his office. The first clear evidence came through the bank. A routine compliance review identified transfers from Vale Global subsidiaries to a consulting firm called Northstar Image Holdings. The amounts were too large for public relations work. Several transfers occurred immediately before purchases of jewelry, a penthouse, and a yacht registered through another company. Elena asked Haven Ridge's chief risk officer to investigate. The documents led to Vanessa. They also led to Celeste. A family office controlled by Adrian's mother had received millions through consulting agreements for services that could not be verified. Then came the forged guarantees. To obtain secondary financing without Haven Ridge's approval, Adrian had pledged assets already securing the $12 billion facility. Some documents carried Elena's signature, authorizing the use of supposed marital property. Elena stared at the scanned signature for a long time. It was almost perfect. Adrian had watched her sign thousands of cards, forms, and foundation letters. He knew the curve of the E, the narrow loop in the L, and the firm final stroke. But he had missed one detail. After her father died, Elena changed the way she signed her surname. She shortened the final flourish because Jonathan had once joked that it looked like a road leading nowhere. The forged signature used the old version. Adrian, she realized, had copied it from their marriage certificate. She could have confronted him then. Instead, she asked the investigators to continue. Each day brought another betrayal, hidden accounts, undisclosed collateral, payments to Vanessa, messages between Adrian and lawyers discussing how to remove Elena from the estate after the divorce. In one message, Vanessa asked whether Elena would contest the mansion. Adrian replied, "She has no idea how anything works. She thinks being quiet makes her dignified." Celeste responded with a laughing symbol. Elena read the message twice. Then she closed the file and went to her prenatal appointment alone. The doctor placed the monitor against her stomach. A rapid heartbeat filled the room. For months, Elena had been making decisions as a wife trying to save a marriage. In that instant, listening to the child Adrian intended to expose to scandal and instability, she began making decisions as a mother. She instructed Haven Ridge to prepare enforcement options. Not to act. Not yet. She wanted Adrian to have one final opportunity to choose truth. Their anniversary approached. Elena suggested dinner at home, hoping privacy might encourage honesty. Adrian agreed too quickly. He told her to wear something formal. On the afternoon of the dinner, a housekeeper entered Elena's dressing room carrying an empty velvet ring box. "I found this in the guest suite," the woman whispered. Elena opened it. The label belonged to the jeweler who had cleaned her wedding ring the previous year. She looked down at her bare hand. Since her fingers had begun swelling during pregnancy, she had kept the ring in the safe. Or believed she had. "Thank you," Elena said. The housekeeper hesitated. "Mrs. Vale, there are people arriving downstairs." "How many?" "Mr. Vale's lawyers, Mrs. Celeste, Miss Cole." Elena understood. She dressed in a dark blue gown her father had once said made her look unafraid. Before leaving the room, she placed Jonathan's letter in her handbag. The anniversary table had been arranged beneath 3 crystal chandeliers. Candles flickered beside white roses. Adrian sat at the head. Vanessa sat to his right. Celeste sat opposite Elena's empty chair. A bottle of champagne waited in ice despite Adrian, knowing Elena could not drink. The message was deliberate. This celebration was not for her. She entered. Vanessa's hand rested on the table, displaying the pale diamond and 2 emeralds. For 1 second, grief struck Elena more sharply than anger. She remembered Jonathan fastening the necklace before her wedding. She remembered Adrian's vows beneath the cedar trees. She remembered her grandmother's survival. Then she remembered her father's warning. Never place your inheritance in the hands of someone who thinks love makes you careless. Elena sat. Adrian began with a speech about how people grew in different directions. He said marriage had become restrictive. He claimed they had lost emotional compatibility. He spoke in the calm tone Vanessa had trained him to use during hostile interviews. Elena looked at the documents waiting beside his plate. "Is there a shorter version?" she asked. Adrian's jaw tightened. "I am trying to treat you respectfully." Vanessa lowered her eyes to hide a smile. Celeste did not bother. "My son has given you the best years of his life," she said. "The graceful thing would be to leave without causing embarrassment." Elena turned toward her. "Embarrassment for whom?" Adrian pushed the divorce papers across the table. "For everyone." Elena read the first page. The petition portrayed her as distant, uninvolved, and dependent upon Adrian's generosity. It requested enforcement of a marital agreement Adrian's attorneys appeared not to understand. The settlement offered Elena a small apartment, a monthly allowance, and access to 1 vehicle for 6 months. In return, she would waive claims against Vale Global and vacate the estate immediately. "You expect me to sign tonight?" she asked. "I expect you to be reasonable." "And my pregnancy?" Adrian glanced at Vanessa before answering. We will arrange support after paternity is formally confirmed. Silence settled over the room. Even Celeste shifted slightly. Elena placed both hands on the table. You are questioning whether this child is yours. My lawyers advised that all matters should be verified. Your lawyers. Vanessa spoke for the first time. This does not need to become unpleasant. Elena looked at her wedding ring on Vanessa's hand. You are wearing something that belongs to me while advising me to remain pleasant. Adrian leaned back. I gave her the ring. You could not give what you did not own. It was in my house. No, Elena said quietly, it was in your wife's safe. Celeste slapped one palm against the table. That attitude is why this marriage failed. Then she applauded. Slowly at first, then with growing satisfaction. Vanessa joined her with a single mocking clap. Adrian did not applaud, but he allowed it. That was the moment Elena stopped searching his face for the man she had married. He was gone, or perhaps he had never existed. She closed the divorce petition. I will not sign this. Adrian's expression hardened. Then you can leave without the offer. I am not leaving my home tonight. It is my home. No. The single word unsettled him. Adrian stood. Security will escort you out. Elena remained seated. Before you do this, I am giving you one opportunity. Tell the truth about North Star Image Holdings. Tell me about the duplicate collateral, the transfers to your mother, and the guarantees carrying my forged signature. Color drained from Vanessa's face. Celeste stopped smiling. Adrian's surprise lasted less than a second, then arrogance rushed in to cover it. You have been spying on me. I have been reading documents submitted to a bank. You don't understand those documents. I understand them better than you do. He walked around the table and pulled Elena's chair back. Get out. She rose slowly, protecting her balance. You are making this decision in front of witnesses. I want witnesses. You may regret that. I regret not doing it sooner. The security guards entered but did not touch her. They had worked at the estate for years. Both looked ashamed. Elena picked up her handbag. As she passed Vanessa, she paused. My grandmother crossed 3 borders wearing that ring, she said. You will not make it through one audit with it. Vanessa laughed too loudly. Elena continued toward the gates. Rain had begun falling, just as it had on the day she met Adrian at Havenridge. The gravel path curved beneath cedar trees toward the Iron Griffins. Behind her, music began playing inside the mansion. Celeste had chosen the same classical piece she once used to drown out debt collectors. The past was knocking again. This time, no amount of music would silence it. At the gatehouse, Elena called Margaret Shaw, Havenridge's chief risk officer. Margaret answered immediately. Are you safe? Yes. Did he sign the secondary collateral certification? He did. And the transfer authorization? Yes. Then we have confirmation of fraud and covenant breaches. Elena looked back at the mansion. Through the tall windows, she could see Adrian raising a champagne glass. Vanessa stood beside him wearing the ring. Celeste sat beneath the chandelier like a queen who had finally won a war. Activate the protective provisions, Elena said. Margaret was silent for a breath. All accounts. Every account connected to secured collateral, suspend discretionary access, notify the syndicate, file emergency motions before dawn. This will trigger a collapse. No, Elena replied. His choices triggered the collapse. And the estate. Revoke Vale Global's occupancy license. Margaret exhaled. Under whose authority? Elena touched the old letter inside her handbag. Mine. Within 12 minutes, Vale Global's primary operating accounts were restricted. By midnight, corporate cards stopped functioning. At 1 in the morning, wire transfers failed across 3 countries. At 2:15, Havenridge notified partner banks of suspected misrepresentation. At 3, Adrian finally realized something was wrong. He was in the library with Vanessa when his chief financial officer called. "Our accounts are locked." Adrian frowned. "Which accounts?" "All of them." "That is impossible." "The payroll account, acquisition reserves, construction disbursement facilities, executive accounts, everything tied to Havenridge." "Call the bank." "We have, they referred us to legal counsel." Adrian's phone vibrated with another message, then another. Aviation Services had suspended access to the company jet. The yacht management firm required immediate payment. A foreign lender demanded clarification regarding duplicated collateral. Vanessa stood near the fireplace, twisting Alina's ring. "This is a technical issue," Adrian said. His chief financial officer lowered his voice. "Havenridge says there is evidence of fraud." Adrian looked toward the dark windows. Rain streaked the glass. "Who authorized the freeze?" "They won't say." Adrian already knew. "Not the name." "The source." "Elena." He did not yet understand how, but he remembered her final warning. He remembered her questions about North Star and the guarantees. He remembered the certainty in her voice when she said the mansion was not his. For the first time, fear slipped beneath his confidence. He called Elena. She did not answer. At sunrise, Havenridge's attorneys arrived with court officers and an emergency receivership order. Vale Global had violated multiple lending covenants. The bank was entitled to secure pledged assets, while the court reviewed allegations of fraud. Adrian stormed into the entrance hall, wearing yesterday's dinner jacket. "You cannot seize an operating company without notice." The lead attorney handed him a folder. Notice was provided under Section 27 of the Master Facility Agreement. "I never agreed to this." "Your signature appears on every page." Adrian flipped through the document. The attorney watched him carefully. "You may find it useful to read the sections you signed." Outside, company vehicles were being inventoried. Access codes to offices changed. Directors received instructions to preserve documents. Employees were warned not to destroy records. Celeste descended the staircase in a silk robe. "What is happening?" Adrian did not answer. A court officer approached her. "Mrs. Vale, we need access to the ACE study." "No one enters my private rooms." "The rooms are part of the estate." "This is my son's property." The attorney looked at the document in his hand. The estate is owned by Marlowe Stewardship Property Holdings. Vale Global occupied it under a revocable executive residence agreement. Celeste stared. "Marlowe." The griffins on the gates suddenly made sense. Adrian grabbed the attorney's sleeve. "Where is my wife?" "Your legal counsel may contact Ms. Marlowe's representatives." "My wife is Mrs. Vale. Her trust records use her legal family name." Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs, carrying 2 suitcases. "My driver says the company car has been disabled." The attorney glanced at her hand. "That ring may be relevant to a reported property claim." Vanessa covered it instinctively. Adrian turned on her. "Take it off." Her mouth fell open. "You gave it to me." "Take it off." She pulled the ring free and dropped it into his palm. The gesture should have reminded Adrian of everything he had destroyed. Instead, he slipped the ring into his pocket and focused on saving his image. By 8 o'clock, financial news channels reported that Haven Ridge Bank had suspended funding for the Vail Renaissance expansion. By 9, Vail Global's share price collapsed. By 10, 2 independent directors resigned. Before noon, regulators announced a preliminary review. Adrian spent the day making calls. Politicians who once accepted invitations to his yacht were unavailable. Investors who praised his courage demanded repayment. Advisors who had called him visionary began documenting that they had warned him about excessive debt. Celeste called Elena repeatedly. The first message was furious. "You have embarrassed this family. Call Adrian and correct whatever lie you told the bank." The second was colder. "You are carrying my grandchild. Think carefully before destroying the child's inheritance." The third arrived at midnight. "Elena, perhaps everyone was emotional. We should discuss this privately." Elena listened without responding. She was staying at a quiet apartment overlooking the river district where Adrian's first towers stood. The apartment belonged to a Marlowe Foundation and had been kept for visiting trustees. Margaret sat across from her at the dining table. Between them lay boxes of evidence. "You should rest," Margaret said. "So should you." "I am not pregnant." Elena managed a tired smile. Margaret had worked with Jonathan for 22 years. She possessed the disciplined calm of someone who had watched wealthy men attempt the same dishonest tricks under different names. "Your father worried this day might come," Margaret said. Elena looked toward the window. "Did he tell you that?" "He asked me to watch the Vail exposure." "And you did not tell me." "He instructed me to respect your marriage unless the bank was endangered." Elena's smile faded. "So he trusted the bank's protection more than my judgment." "No, he trusted your heart. He worried that Adrian would use it against your judgment." Margaret opened a smaller file. "There is something else." Inside were insurance records, emails, and medical authorization forms. Adrian's attorneys had prepared a strategy for challenging Elena's ability to manage financial affairs. They planned to portray her as emotionally unstable after pregnancy complications. A private investigator had been hired to collect photographs of her entering clinics. Vanessa had drafted talking points describing Adrian as a concerned husband protecting his company from a distressed spouse. Elena felt the child move inside her. The movement was small but unmistakable. "They planned this before the anniversary," she whispered. "Months before." "How long has the affair been going on?" "Financial records suggest at least 18 months. Elena closed the file. Grief did not arrive as a dramatic cry. It settled through her slowly, a weight pressing on every memory: business trips, cancelled dinners, Vanessa touching Adrian's tie, Celeste defending his absences. 18 months meant he had held Elena after a prenatal appointment, while already planning to remove her. It meant the final betrayal was not impulsive. It was architecture. Built carefully, financed secretly, and decorated with lies. "What happens next?" Elena asked. Margaret answered, "As a banker. The receivers secure assets. The board removes Adrian. Regulators investigate the forged guarantees. Prosecutors decide whether to bring charges." "And as his wife?" "That answer is yours." Elena touched the folder containing the divorce petition. "No," she said. That answer became his when he pushed the papers across the table. 3 days later, Adrian's board removed him as chief executive. He entered the meeting expecting loyalty. He had personally appointed half the directors and believed the others feared him. But fear shifts quickly when money disappears. The boardroom overlooked the city. Adrian's name remained engraved on the glass doors, but 2 security officers waited outside. The chair read the resolution. Adrian interrupted. "This company exists because of me." One director avoided his eyes. It may fail because of you. Havenridge engineered this. Havenridge enforced the agreement you violated. My wife manipulated the bank. The room became still. The chair folded his hands. Your wife appears to control the bank. Adrian laughed. No one joined him. That is absurd. The chair pushed forward a corporate ownership chart. At the top stood Marlowe Stewardship Trust. Beneath it were controlling entities, voting agreements, and Havenridge Bank. A red line connected Elena Marlowe to the trust as principal beneficiary and chair. Adrian stared. He remembered the rainy waiting room, the private elevator, the lending officer addressing her respectfully, Jonathan's quiet confidence, Elena's warnings, her ability to contact executives without explanation. He remembered signing agreements while she watched. How long, he asked. Her family has controlled Havenridge for generations. And she never told me. The chair's expression hardened. Given the forged signatures, I am not sure secrecy is your strongest complaint. Adrian rose. You are all benefiting from this betrayal. The chair nodded toward security. You have 10 minutes to collect personal items from your office. Adrian left with nothing but his phone and the ring in his pocket. Outside the building, reporters surrounded him. Mr. Vale, did you falsify collateral documents? Did your wife order the account freeze? Is Vanessa Cole your romantic partner? Will you resign from all Vale global entities? He pushed through the crowd without answering. For years, he had paid Vanessa to control narratives. Now she was not beside him. She was at the penthouse, discovering that it had been purchased with money transferred through a secured Vale global subsidiary. The receiver claimed it as recoverable property. An officer handed her an inventory notice. Vanessa called Adrian. You said the penthouse was mine. It will be. They are changing the locks. Go to a hotel. My cards don't work. Use your own money. There was a pause. That money is in North Star. Adrian closed his eyes. North Star's accounts were frozen. Vanessa lowered her voice. You need to fix this. I am trying. No, you are losing. The word cut deeper than any accusation. Adrian hung up. Celeste fared no better. The mansion staff stopped accepting her instructions after the occupancy license was revoked. She ordered the housekeeper to prepare lunch and was told the kitchen was under receiver control. This family employed you for 8 years, Celeste snapped. The housekeeper met her eyes. Mrs. Elena employed me. Celeste slapped her. A security camera captured everything. Within an hour, the receiver's representative ordered Celeste to leave. She packed jewelry, designer clothing, and antique silver into trunks. Most items were held for inventory because they had been purchased through company accounts. The embroidered towels were allowed to remain. Outside, Celeste stood beside 6 suitcases while photographers gathered beyond the gates. She called Adrian. Where am I supposed to go? The City Hotel. They declined the reservation. Why? Your company owes them money. My company. Celeste heard the danger in his tone. She softened hers. Our company, darling, our family. Adrian looked at the black ownership chart still visible in his mind. There had never been an ours. Only things he believed belonged to him until someone produced the documents. Elena returned to the estate 1 week after the anniversary dinner. She arrived in a simple car with Margaret and 2 attorneys. No reporters were invited. No announcement was issued. The Griffin gates opened before her. Adrian was waiting in the entrance hall, He had refused to leave, claiming marital occupancy rights. His lawyers advised him that the argument was weak, but pride had become the last property he could still pretend to own. He looked exhausted. His tailored suit hung loosely, stubble darkened his face. For a moment, Elena saw the young man in the bank waiting room, the man with rain on his shoulders and a dream in his voice. Then she remembered Vanessa wearing the ring. Adrian took it from his pocket. "I brought this back." Elena did not reach for it. "You stole it." "I made a mistake." "You made hundreds of decisions." He placed the ring on the table between them. "Did you ever love me?" The question nearly made her laugh. "You served me divorce papers beside your mistress and questioned our child's paternity. Now you want reassurance. You hid who you were." "I hid what I owned. I never hid who I was. You let me believe I built everything alone. I advised you, I supported you, I protected your projects from collapse. I never asked for credit because I thought marriage was not a competition. You controlled the bank holding my debt. My family controlled it before you met me. You could have destroyed me at any time." "No," Elena said. "I could have enforced agreements at any time. You destroyed yourself when you broke them." Adrian turned toward Margaret. "Leave us." Margaret did not move. Elena said, "She stays. This is between husband and wife. It stopped being private when you used corporate funds to finance your affair." Adrian flinched. Elena opened the evidence case. She laid out the forged guarantees, transfer records, insurance documents, and messages discussing plans to discredit her. Adrian's expression changed as each page appeared. First denial, then calculation, finally fear. The messages are taken out of context. What context makes fraud acceptable? My advisors structured the transfers. You approved them. Vanessa handled North Star. You authorized her. My mother did not understand the payments. She signed the consulting agreements. Adrian leaned over the table. What do you want? Elena had imagined this moment throughout sleepless nights. She expected anger to guide her. Instead, the child inside her shifted and clarity returned. I want the truth preserved before you attempt to rewrite it. I am asking what settlement you want. This is not a negotiation over money. Everything is a negotiation. That belief is why you have nothing left to offer. She slid a document toward him. It required Adrian to confess publicly to the false collateral filings, disclose every hidden account, resign permanently from Vale Global, surrender claims to the estate, and cooperate with investigators. In exchange, Havenridge would support a restructuring designed to preserve employee jobs, complete essential public projects, and separate Adrian's misconduct from the viable parts of the company. Elena would also request that prosecutors consider his cooperation. Adrian read the first page and pushed it away. You want me to humiliate myself. I want you to accept responsibility. You want the world to see you defeat me. The world has already seen you defeat yourself. My name is on those buildings. Your debt is beneath them. He paced toward the windows. If I sign this, I lose everything. You have already lost control. Signing may preserve what remains for the employees and investors you endangered. And our child. Elena's face became still. Our child will be protected from your debts and your public lies. You cannot keep my child from me. I am not making that decision today. A court will evaluate what is safe. Adrian spun toward her. I am not dangerous. You hired people to portray your pregnant wife as mentally unstable so you could seize an advantage in divorce proceedings. That was legal strategy. That answer is exactly why I do not trust you. He looked at the confession again. What happens if I refuse? Margaret answered. Havenridge proceeds with full enforcement. Evidence goes to regulators and prosecutors without a cooperation recommendation. Civil claims will seek recovery from every recipient of diverted funds, including my mother. Yes, Vanessa. Yes. Adrian stared at Alina. You would do that. You did that, she replied. You involved them when you sent them the money. His pride made the decision before reason could intervene. No. Alina waited. Adrian tore the first page in half. I will fight you. I will expose the bank, the trust, and every secret your family has hidden. I will tell the world you married me to control me. Alina gathered the remaining pages. You were offered a door. I do not need your door. No, she said, you have always preferred gates. She picked up the ring and walked away. The criminal investigation began publicly the next morning. Agents searched Vale Global offices, North Star's registered address, and Celeste's temporary residence. The news channels displayed photographs of Adrian entering court beneath headlines about fraud, conspiracy, and false statements to lenders. Vanessa issued a statement claiming she had been misled. Celeste blamed Alina. Adrian blamed everyone. During a televised interview, he described himself as the victim of a hidden financial dynasty. He said Alina had manipulated their marriage to gain control of his company. The interviewer asked a simple question. Did you forge your wife's signature? Adrian paused for 4 seconds. Those 4 seconds were replayed millions of times. Alina did not respond publicly. Instead, Havenridge announced a restructuring fund to protect workers and suppliers. Projects with public value would continue under independent management. Luxury developments would be sold. Executive bonuses were cancelled. Recoverable assets from North Star would be returned to Vale Global's creditors. Employees who had expected immediate unemployment received letters assuring them that payroll would continue. Adrian watched the announcement from a hotel room. He recognized Alina's influence in every sentence. She had taken control of the ruins and begun building something that no longer needed his name. That hurt more than the account freezes. The empire had not died with him. It had simply continued without him. Months passed. Alina's pregnancy became visible beneath winter coats. She moved carefully through board meetings, court appointments, and medical visits. Margaret repeatedly urged her to reduce her schedule. Alina tried. Yet every investigation uncovered another person harmed by Adrian's expansion. Small contractors had been pressured to accept delayed payments. Pension funds had invested based on false certifications. Communities had been promised parks, while environmental funds were redirected to vanity projects. Alina visited the River District one afternoon and stood beside the first warehouse Adrian had transformed. A maintenance worker recognized her. Mrs. Vale. Alina is fine. He removed his cap. My daughter works in the North Tower. We thought everyone would lose their jobs. I am glad she did not. They say you saved the company. No, thousands of people kept it worth saving. He hesitated. Mr. Vale used to say he built the river from nothing. Alina looked toward the water. The river was here first. On her way home, she remembered one of her earliest conversations with Adrian. Most people only recognize value after someone else proves it exists, he had said. He had been talking about land. Alina now understood that he applied the belief to people. He valued them only when their usefulness became visible. By then, Vanessa had turned against him. Prosecutors showed her records proving that Adrian planned to make her responsible for North Star if investigators discovered the transfers. Draft emails described her as an external consultant acting beyond authority. She agreed to cooperate. Celeste called it betrayal. Vanessa called it survival. During her deposition, she removed all jewelry and wore a plain black suit. She admitted the affair began during a conference 18 months before the anniversary dinner. Adrian told her his marriage was emotionally finished. He promised her the mansion, the penthouse, and a position beside him after the expansion succeeded. "Did you know the wedding ring belonged to Elena?" an attorney asked. Vanessa swallowed. "Yes. Why did you wear it?" Adrian said it would make a statement. "What statement?" "That she no longer had power in the house." "And did you believe that?" Vanessa looked down. "Yes. What do you believe now?" "That we never understood whose house it was." Celeste refused to cooperate. She appeared at every hearing wearing dark glasses and carrying herself with theatrical dignity. Outside the courthouse, she told reporters that Elena was a vindictive woman using money to punish a faithful family. A journalist asked why a faithful family included Adrian's mistress at the anniversary dinner. Celeste entered the car without answering. Privately, her circumstances deteriorated. Most of her jewelry was sold to repay diverted company funds. The consulting payments she had received became part of the civil recovery case. Friends who once attended her charity galas stopped returning calls. She moved into a small rental owned by a distant cousin. The first evening, she placed grocery store flowers in the front window. Then someone knocked. Celeste froze. For a moment, she was young again, sitting in darkness while debt collectors called her husband's name. She turned on classical music. The knocking continued. It was a process server. Appearances could not delay consequences forever. Adrian's trial was scheduled for the spring. His attorneys advised him to accept a plea agreement. Vanessa's cooperation, the forged documents, and recorded calls created a strong case. He still refused. "Elena will not let the father of her child go to prison," he insisted. His lead attorney stuttered him. "You questioned whether you were the father. That was strategy. Your strategies are why you are here." Adrian fired him. He hired another lawyer using money borrowed from an old acquaintance. The new lawyer promised aggression, public pressure, and a countersuit against Havenridge. Within 3 weeks, the acquaintance demanded repayment. Adrian began selling personal items not claimed by creditors: watches, paintings, a vintage car stored under his own name. The ring remained with Elena. She kept it in Jonathan's study, not on her finger. Her grandmother had survived war, bankruptcy, and exile while wearing it. Elena no longer believed survival required displaying what others had tried to take. Some things could be reclaimed without being restored to their old purpose. 2 weeks before Elena's due date, Adrian arrived at the estate gates. He had not been invited. Security informed Elena while she was reviewing nursery plans. She looked through the upstairs window and saw him standing between the griffins. Snow gathered on his shoulders. He looked smaller than she remembered. "Should we turn him away?" the guard asked. Elena placed one hand over her stomach. "Ask why he is here." The answer came minutes later. "He says he wants to discuss the baby." Elena considered meeting him in the gatehouse, but her doctor had warned against unnecessary stress. "Tell him communication must go through counsel." Adrian refused to leave. After an hour, Celeste arrived in a taxi. Vanessa came shortly afterward, though nobody understood why. From the balcony, Elena watched the 3 people who had sat at her anniversary table gather outside the estate. Adrian argued with Vanessa. Celeste blamed both of them. The sound carried faintly across the snow. You said she would sign, Vanessa shouted. You wore the ring, Celeste cried. You provoked her. You applauded. My son was ending an unhappy marriage. He was transferring money into your accounts. Adrian raised both hands. Stop. Neither woman listened. Security prepared to call the authorities. Then Adrian looked up and saw Elena on the balcony. His anger disappeared. He approached the gate. Elena. She remained still. I need to speak to you. You were told to contact my attorneys. This is about our child. You remembered our child when your trial date arrived. His face tightened. My lawyer says you can recommend leniency. I already offered that. I made a mistake. You tore the offer in half. I was angry. You were proud. Snow fell between them. Celeste stepped forward. Elena, this has gone far enough. Whatever happened between husband and wife should not destroy an entire family. Elena looked at the woman who had applauded. Which family? Celeste's lips trembled. You know what I mean. I know what you meant when you questioned my place in my own home. I know what Adrian meant when he questioned our child's paternity. I know what Vanessa meant when she wore my ring. Vanessa wrapped her coat more tightly around herself. I am sorry. Elena believed that Vanessa regretted the consequences. She was less certain that she regretted the cruelty. Adrian gripped the bars of the gate. Please. It was the first time Elena had heard him use the word without performance. For a dangerous second, memory softened her. She saw him beneath the cedar trees on their wedding day. She saw him celebrating his first building permit. She remembered late nights when they ate takeout on the floor because they owned no proper dining table. Then another memory rose. The anniversary champagne. The divorce papers. His hand pulling back her chair. Get out. Elena did not need revenge. She needed boundaries strong enough to survive nostalgia. You are not here because you understand what you did, she said. You are here because the world finally stopped protecting you from it. I lost everything. No, you spent everything: trust, loyalty, credibility, and mercy. The bill arrived after you had nothing left. Our child deserves a father. Our child deserves a father who accepts responsibility. Whether you become that man is not something I can decide for you. Adrian bowed his head. What do you want me to do? Tell the truth without demanding a reward. He looked toward Celeste and Vanessa. Both women waited for him to produce another escape. For once, there was none. Elena turned toward the doors. Elena. She paused. Adrian's voice broke. Did the Empire ever belong to me? She looked over her shoulder. The opportunity did. Then she went inside. The gates closed. Adrian stood outside until the snow covered his shoes. 3 days later, he contacted prosecutors and requested a cooperation meeting. He confessed to directing the forged guarantees, concealing collateral transfers, and using North Star to divert corporate funds. He admitted that Vanessa acted under his instructions and that Celeste's consulting agreements had no legitimate business purpose. He also confessed that the story told at the anniversary dinner was false. Elena had not been distant. She had not depended on his generosity. She had not endangered the company. He had prepared the divorce to remove someone he believed might discover his misconduct. The confession did not erase the harm, but it changed the outcome. Adrian received a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation and restitution efforts. Vanessa avoided prison but surrendered the penthouse yacht interest, and remaining North Star funds. She was prohibited from serving as an officer of a public company for several years. Celeste settled the civil claims by returning property and funds. She never apologized publicly. Privately, she wrote Elena a letter. It began with explanations. I wanted security for my son. I feared returning to poverty. I believed you looked down on us. Elena read the first page and set it aside. Fear could explain cruelty. It could not excuse applause. She did not answer. Her daughter was born on a clear morning in early spring. Elena named her Myra Jonathan Marlowe. Myra meant peace in one language and wonder in another. Jonathan honored the grandfather who had protected a future he would never see. Margaret waited outside the hospital room with flowers. Not white roses, wild flowers. When the nurse placed Myra in Elena's arms, the child opened her eyes with a serious expression that made Elena laugh for the first time in weeks. You arrived after the storm, she whispered. Adrian was informed through counsel. He sent a letter rather than demanding entry. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I will not question your decisions. Please tell her, when the time is right, that her father failed before she was born, but that he finally stopped lying about it. Elena folded the letter. She did not know whether Adrian's remorse would survive discomfort, time, and public disgrace. True change could not be measured by one confession made when every other option disappeared. She decided not to promise anything. The court would determine future contact after evaluating Adrian's conduct. Myra's safety would come before Adrian's desire to feel redeemed. Haven Ridge completed the Vail Global restructuring later that year. The company was renamed Riverstone Infrastructure, removing the name that Adrian had carved across skylines as though cities were monuments to him. Employees received shares. Independent directors replaced loyalists. Environmental obligations were funded before executive bonuses. Elena refused the chief executive position. She remained chair of the trust and appointed experienced managers. During the first annual meeting, an employee asked why she had not taken control publicly years earlier. Elena considered the question. Because I believed supporting someone quietly was an expression of love, she said. I still believe quiet support can be love, but support without accountability becomes permission, and permission can become harm. Her answer traveled through the company. Some employees printed it and placed it beside their desks. The estate changed as well. Celeste's embroidered towels disappeared. The oversized portraits Adrian commissioned were removed from the hall. Elena restored Jonathan's library and transformed the East Wing into offices for a foundation supporting women facing financial abuse and workplace retaliation. She did not establish the foundation to celebrate her victory. She created it because most people in her situation did not own banks. They could not freeze accounts with one call. They could not hire teams of attorneys. They could not reclaim a home through trust documents. But they could learn to preserve evidence, understand shared finances, seek legal support, and refuse to accept humiliation as the price of stability. Elena knew her wealth had given her options many others lacked. She decided that power meant little unless it widened options for someone else. A year after the anniversary dinner, she stood beneath the cedar trees while Myra took unsteady steps across the grass. Margaret sat nearby, pretending not to worry whenever the child leaned too far forward. The griffin gates remained visible through the trees. Elena remembered Adrian's wedding promise. One day, everything beyond these gates will be ours. He had believed ownership was proof of worth. Elena now understood that gates served two purposes. They allowed chosen people inside, and they kept danger from returning simply because it knocked with regret. Myra stumbled. Elena caught her. The child laughed and reached for the pale diamond ring hanging from a chain around Elena's neck. Elena had decided not to wear it on her hand. It no longer represented her marriage. It represented the women who had survived before her and the daughter who would inherit their story. "One day," Elena whispered, "this may belong to you." Myra grabbed the ring with both hands. "But first, you will learn that nothing beautiful should ever cost you your dignity." Far away, Adrian received a photograph of his daughter through a court-approved family service. In the picture, Myra stood beneath the cedar trees, holding Elena's fingers. He studied the image for a long time. Behind them, the gates were open. Not for him. Not yet. Perhaps never. That uncertainty was part of the consequence. Adrian had spent his life believing every barrier could be overcome through pressure, persuasion, or money. For the first time, he faced a boundary that could not be purchased. He began attending counseling offered through the correctional facility. At first, he treated the sessions as another performance. He spoke about childhood poverty, Celeste's fear, and the pressure of maintaining success. The counselor listened. Then she asked, "When do your explanations become responsibility?" Adrian had no answer. Weeks later, he tried again. "I thought losing control meant becoming powerless." "And what did you do to avoid that feeling?" "I controlled other people." "Your wife?" "Yes." "Your employees?" "Yes." "Your mother and Vanessa?" Adrian resisted. "They benefited." But that was not the question. He looked down. "Yes." The counselor nodded. "Then your empire was never only buildings and companies. It was a system in which everyone's choices had to protect your image." The statement stayed with him. He remembered Celeste playing music while creditors knocked. He remembered learning that shame must be hidden, never faced. He remembered applauding crowds, magazine covers, and the relief he felt whenever people envied him. He had not built wealth to become secure. He had built spectacle to silence the knocking. But the knocking had always been inside him. Elena did not know whether Adrian reached those conclusions. She did not follow his counseling reports. She refused to make his growth another responsibility placed on her shoulders. She focused on Myra, Havenridge, and the foundation. Sometimes grief returned unexpectedly. It appeared when she passed the restaurant where she and Adrian ate near the kitchen. It surfaced when rain struck the bank's marble windows. It tightened her chest whenever someone praised the river district without knowing the lies buried beneath its expansion. Healing did not erase the past. It changed who held authority over it. On the second anniversary of Jonathan's death, Elena visited his grave with Myra. She placed wildflowers beside the stone and read his old letter again. "Remember the gates, remember who holds the keys." For years, Elena thought he meant financial control. Now she understood that he meant something deeper. The gates were judgment. The keys were choice. Adrian had been free to walk through doors opened by trust, generosity, and opportunity. He had chosen deception. Elena had been free to remain trapped by memory, shame, and public expectation. She had chosen herself and her child. Power had not been the bank account. Power had been the decision to stop negotiating with cruelty. Myra placed one small hand against Jonathan's name. Elena smiled. "Your grandfather worried I would forget who I was." Myra made a curious sound. "He was right to worry." Wind moved through the cemetery trees. "But I remembered." Years later, people would retell the story as though Elena had planned every detail from the beginning. They would say she married Adrian while hiding a bank, waited for him to betray her, and destroyed him with a phone call. The truth was less perfect and more human. Elena had loved him. She had doubted herself. She had excused warning signs, delayed difficult truths, and protected a man whose ambition grew sharper each time she softened the consequences. She did not win because she never made mistakes. She survived because, when the final choice arrived, she stopped making the same one. Adrian's downfall was not caused by a powerful wife seeking revenge. It was caused by a man who believed other people's love exempted him from accountability. Vanessa's humiliation was not caused by a stolen ring alone. It was caused by her willingness to treat another woman's pain as proof of her own importance. Celeste's loss was not caused by poverty returning. It was caused by a lifetime spent teaching her son that appearance mattered more than integrity. And Elena's rise was not a sudden transformation. It was the return of a strength she had hidden beneath patience. At the next annual Havenridge dinner, Elena stood before employees, trustees, and community leaders. The event took place in the restored River Warehouse, where she first heard Adrian describe his dream. The walls still carried marks from the building's industrial past. Rather than cover them, the architects preserved them. Soil remembers everything people bury in it, Jonathan had said. Buildings did too. Elena looked across the room. Havenridge financed growth for generations, she began. Sometimes we treated expansion as though size itself were evidence of success. We learned otherwise. She spoke about transparent lending, responsible development, and the duty to intervene when ambition threatened communities. She did not mention Adrian's name. She did not need to. His absence was present in every reform. After the speech, an elderly trustee approached. Your father would be proud. Elena looked toward the tall windows overlooking the river. I hope he would be relieved. The trustee smiled. Pride is often relief wearing formal clothes. Elena laughed. Across the room, Margaret held Myra, now old enough to clap whenever other people did. The sound made Elena pause. For one instant, she remembered Celeste applauding at the anniversary table. Then Myra clapped again, delighted by the lights. Elena walked toward her daughter. Not every applause was cruelty. Not every ring was a prison. Not every gate was punishment. The meaning depended on what people chose to celebrate, promise, and protect. Elena took Myra into her arms. Outside, the river moved steadily through the city, passing towers that once carried Adrian's name and communities that would remain long after every scandal had faded. The empire Adrian tried to possess had never truly belonged to one person. The bank Elena controlled was not valuable because it could seize. It was valuable because it could preserve, rebuild, and refuse to finance destruction disguised as vision. That became Elena's legacy. Not the frozen accounts. Not the seized jets. Not the image of 3 defeated people begging outside her gates. Her legacy was what she did after she had every reason to become cruel. She did not become Adrian. She became accountable to the power he had abused. And that was the victory he had never understood. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that loyalty must never be confused with weakness, and love should never require anyone to surrender dignity, safety, or self-respect. Elena's greatest triumph was not that she controlled a bank or reclaimed an empire. It was that she finally refused to protect those who deliberately harmed her. When betrayal is celebrated, silence can become permission, but firm boundaries can become freedom. If you believe people deserve respect in marriage, honesty in business, and the courage to walk away from humiliation, kindly subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this story. Let your support send a clear message. Cruelty should never be rewarded, accountability should never be feared, and no one should be underestimated simply because they choose to remain calm.